All right, everybody, welcome into episode 140 of the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. Man, I'm stoked about this one today. I got to tell you, my guest on the show today is the absolutely amazing, powerful, passionate Sofia Gonzalez. Now, if you don't know Sofia, here's what you need to know about her. She is a proud Latina who's nationally recognized educator of the year. She's a nonprofit leader with Project 214. She'll talk a little bit about that during the show today. She's a podcast host and she's an education advocate from the Chicagoland area. She's a 15-year veteran as a high school teacher. She's a disruptor. She's an alum in various spaces like Fulbright, Latinos for Education, Urban Leaders Fellowship, and currently is a school ambassador fellow with the U.S. Department of Education. I had the opportunity to connect with Sofia, and I'll tell the story at the very beginning of the podcast recording, but I was cruising social media and I came across a post from her. She was somebody I didn't even follow. Connected with her, reached out within a day. We had a conversation, and now we've really developed a great connection with each other. Man, folks, this is such a great conversation, and it really cuts to the core of some issues that we all need to be focused on, that we all need to be extremely aware of, and that we all need to lean into. And that is that focus on justice, on equity, and honestly, on urban education and the importance that urban education has in our society. Folks, this is an absolutely fantastic conversation, and I just can't wait for you to check it all out. You're going to get it right after this. So I love to cruise social media, and I don't spend a ton of time there, but there are those days where I have a little bit more time than others. And I always find it interesting what pops up in the upper portion of my timeline. Recently, I'm scrolling my timeline and I came across someone that I did not follow. That apparently somebody that I did, how this works, right? Somebody retweets something or whatever. And I come across Sofia Gonzalez and I am immediately interested in what she has to say. And I start clicking on a link and another link and another link. And before you know it, folks, I'm sending a DM to somebody I've never met before and just said, wow, I have to meet you. I have to talk to you. And fortunately, I had that opportunity to sit down and talk with Sofia a couple of weeks ago. And now we're back to record an episode of the podcast. Man, Sofia, I'm gushing already. We haven't even started. You haven't even said a word yet. And here I am gushing over here. Just welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Yes, thank you so much, Darrin. I really appreciate you and your introduction. I'm just looking to have a great conversation here today to inspire some folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do this. Let's maybe kind of give folks a little bit of background, give them a little bit of orientation, some Sofia 101, if you will. Let my listeners know a little bit about you, just some of your journey.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a 15-year veteran in the high school classroom, and I am Chicago born. I'm a daughter of immigrants. I'm a proud Latina, Mexican Rican, half tortilla, half tostone, half boricua, half chicana. For those of you who are from the Latinidad landscape, you know what I just said. I'm very much into the idea of equal education opportunity for all. So education activism is something that I'm deeply ingrained in. And I am a public speaker. I'm a keynote speaker. I've been traveling the country for a few years now. And as we had mentioned, back in the green room, I just got off of a cruise ship. I was a closing keynote for the inaugural Educators at Sea Conference 2024 with Innovation Voyages. Shout out. And it was completely dope. You just never know where your journey will take you when your heart is genuine, when you deeply care about the mission, and when you are committed with such a passion that is without apology. In 2009, I started my first school year in a very gang-infested neighborhood within the city of Chicago. And I was at a second chance charter. And the students that I served were either kicked out or dropped out of the Chicago public school system. And so their last chance to get those high school credits was with our charter school network. And I always mention where I began because it really became just a point of reference for me. And ultimately, it transformed into my North Star. And rather than, graduating my students and teaching and engaging in lessons and curriculum, just like we're taught in graduate school and our teacher preparation programs, I was literally just, it was a baptism by fire. It was a stand and deliver, freedom riders, cinematic, episodic, just experience that I was about to undergo. And no teacher preparation program could have prepared me for this. I mean, I saw the school to prison pipeline just fleshed out in front of me, undercover cops coming into my classroom, taking my students out during sixth period English, and then it wasn't until the following year where I really started to lose my students to gang and to gun violence. And, I'll never forget my first student funeral. It was, something that just really just impacted me. I mean, forever. And the first student that I lost, I met his mother in the parking lot of the funeral, and we exchanged some words. And I ended up saying what has become the thesis statement of my life. And I said, in the name of your son, I'm going to do something about this. I don't know what, I don't know how, but I know that I'm going to use my classroom, my heart, these hands. And it's been over almost 15 years later, Darrin, and I have not broken my promise. So it was there where I realized, what? I need to become more than just a teacher. This is not just a career. Like, this is transforming into a calling. And I just hit the ground running, like advocating, just really engaging a life of activism in the name of urban education, and just really just wanting to amplify the voices of my students and those that are on the margins of our school system. And it just kind of took off from there. I mean, from there, I started a nonprofit with a group of leaders called Project 214 in honor of my first classroom number, Room 214, where the madness and the magic all began. And it started very grassroots. We were passing out school supplies and basic resources that I noticed a lot of my students weren't coming in with. And it just kind of catapulted from there, and we went national. And we ended up forming partnerships in Panama, Costa Rica, El Salvador, and Puerto Rico when the storm hit, which is also where I'm from. And it just really became something special. And right now, I'm just kind of like ebbing and flowing. It's been wild. I've entered a lot of fellowships since then. Some of them are, Fulbright, and currently the U.S. Department of Education School Ambassador Fellowship. And I'm just excited to be on this journey. I call myself a wounded healer. I'm a wounded healer, Darrin. I'm just out here. I'm just out here just trying to amplify the voices and just trying not to normalize, things that, a child's zip code should never determine their destiny. And fair access to the classroom should be a fundamental civil right and not a privilege for the select few. And these are some of the messages that I carry around with me pretty much across the world.
Man, it's just so powerful. When I first came across your profile and went and clicked on, a couple of different links, you have a really powerful video, folks. I'll link it in the show notes that really goes a little further into that story around Project 214, and your first student that you lost to gun violence. Just super, super powerful stuff. Let's, man, there's so much there. I want to loop back. First something a little bit lighter, just to have a little bit of fun with this, and then I do want to dig a little bit more into your advocacy work and some of the things that you're pushing so hard for, and how you're going about doing that. But let's go back. So, folks, you did not hear Sofia wrong. She was a keynote on a cruise. Not everybody has that opportunity. And what's really interesting, I'm sure you get this question sometimes too, when people know that you're in the business speaking, they really think everything is just so glamorous, right? Oh, you're traveling to all these great places. And I mean, realize sometimes the 3 or 4 hour rides or drives, in a rental car, or the canceled flights and all that kind of stuff. You even mentioned before we came on air, the choppy waters and all that kind of stuff. But you got to speak on a cruise, so that is a little bit glamorous. Now, let's not necessarily talk much about the cruise. Let's talk a little bit about that keynote. Uh, Share with my listeners just a little bit. What was the message that you delivered that evening, as you're wrapping up this cruise?
Such a poignant question, and it's actually one that's really going to set me up for a little slam dunk here. It's turned into my signature keynote. It's called From Trauma to Transformation. This is our call to action. And it's very special to me. It's one that I really worked hard on developing. And it has really just catapulted onto so many national and now international platforms that I was not even prepared for. But it's like places and spaces are really making room for this message. And ultimately, the message is clear. The state of education is under fire, from systemic racism to linguistic oppression to racial injustice to school shootings to COVID-19. How are we going to be able to circumnavigate this trauma? And so I really tried to craft together a heartfelt message through the art of poetry and storytelling to cut a new provocative path forward towards social change. So I give what I call flows instead of best practices, because I feel like these are things that we have to ebb and flow in. And the first one that I give is to turn within. We have to do the mirror work. We have to look within ourselves, and we have to assess our own injuries as folks that are on the ground proximate to these issues, and especially for those of us who are, in high needs settings. So I really come from a lens and a framework of an urban educator and some of those issues that are very front and center in urban education. But it really connects to all of us that are in the realm of education and wanting to make it more equitable. And I say, listen, in order for us to stay in good trouble, we got to get into the trouble of tending to our injuries. Because if you're injured, then I'm injured, and we cannot move the mission forward. And so this idea of turning within, really working on self and healing. Trauma definitely calls for healing, and many of us don't take the time to pause and heal. And that's something that I admonish those who are in the audience to think about. Then I say to turn the tables. This idea of using your sphere of influence to turn the tide. And wherever you're at, whether you're a school leader, whether you're a school administrator, whether you're in the classroom, whether you're a paraprofessional, whether you're in the policy realm, wherever you reside, will you use your resources and your sphere of influence? And then I bring about this biblical reference where Jesus was in the temple and he saw that there was this scandal going on in the front of the temple, and folks were overcharging those who wanted to come and sacrifice. So I bring some biblical context in just for the sake of this religious figure named Jesus who flipped the table and was just enraged with a righteous indignation. And I bring this reference to the front and to the forefront and say, this is talking about the church house, but I'm talking about the schoolhouse. Will you, and are you audacious enough, right? Do you have the audacity and the scandal, like some of our former freedom riders, like the late John Lewis and Dr. King and the living Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez? Do you have the audacity to flip some tables in the name of equity and justice for all? And I literally flip a table. I do. I ask for a table in whatever space I'm in, and I flip that bad boy. And people are like, no, she did it. And I'm like, yes, I did. And I'm scared too. I'm like, I hope I don't break something. I hope that I don't fall. But I be flipping tables. And I flipped the table on the cruise ship. Yes, I did. And then last but not least, I say turn to your neighbor. So TTT, this alliteration. I'm an English teacher by day, right, and also a poet. So turning to your neighbor, this idea of collective agency, and then I have a little bit of a illustration with that. I don't want to give all my goodies away, but this
Oh no,
idea,
yeah.
right? But this idea of turning within, turning the tables, and turning to your neighbor in collective agency. This is what has the capacity and the just enormity and ability and the unction and the power to transform trauma into transformation. And this is what I argue is going to move the needle forward and keep folks where they need to be instead of burning out and turning out and being a part of the teacher shortage and the crisis that we're facing. If we can encourage folks, if we can heal folks, if we can liberate folks, and if we can inspire folks to continue to do what they're doing, then this is part of the transformation work that I am here for and that I am trying to amplify. So that's kind of like the basis of that keynote. And I add anecdotal evidence, right? Very, very, man, it's intense. And sometimes I question, I'm like, man, should I come through here with this? Because folks have left the room. Like, this is intense, you know, of student loss and grief. But I feel if I could be just so transparent, which I don't know any other way to be, like, this is my calling. Like, this is the message that I feel that, you know, the world and the heavens have placed on my heart. And it is my civic and social responsibility to be a carrier of this message as a wounded healer.
Man, it's just so powerful. You got me all fired up over here, like ready to jump out of my chair.
Let's go.
Man, but here's what I want to ask, right? So, you know, deliver the message, right? Inspire. But what if I'm a teacher who doesn't feel that they can take a risk where they are? You know, who can't, you know, flip a table. And I don't mean literally flip a table. I mean, as an individual, I love the flipping the table piece, because whether that's literal or figurative,
Yeah,
that's what we need to do. But maybe I'm a teacher, I'm in a classroom, and I don't feel like I can. I don't feel like I can take that risk. So what's something that you say to that educator? How can I still take that message? How can I still take that inspiration and still make a difference if I don't feel like I can take the risk to fully flip the table?
sure. And I think that that's a great question. And some of the things that I share when I do breakouts and workshops, when I really have an opportunity to engage my audience, is as an educator specifically, you do have a level of influence in your classroom. Obviously, that looks different from building to building and district to district. However, I always encourage the teacher to create a safe space, to engage in these culturally responsive practices that are within their reach. Listen, if you have a diverse student population and you are the classroom teacher in that space, representation matters, representation in the text. So can you disrupt the text as just an example of really transforming your classroom and provoking social change? Can you bring about different voices and amplify those that would otherwise be historically marginalized? I feel like a classroom teacher, that can be within reach, and just creating those opportunities for students to feel safe, for them to feel seen, for them to feel heard. That's part of the revolution, right? To see students, who they are, where they're at, in the sense where they don't have to check their cultural identity at the door, but rather they can come in as their full authentic selves. And you as the educator are there to amplify that, to honor that, to celebrate that, and to create space for that. That's just one of the examples and just the thoughts, right? That I give, teachers that are like, man, like, I don't know if I could go ahead and storm Washington like you have. I don't know if I could, be as bold and audacious as you and, storming into your principal's office and saying, listen, man, like, we got to make this happen kind of, circumstance. But we can do this in small steps. And I I always encourage the classroom educator, start with creating that safe space. That makes a world of difference. We don't even understand. I'll give you an example of that, and then we could pivot. When I was working inner city, and I was working with students who were severely at risk, and I had a lot of gang members, as I had mentioned, and a lot of them have suffered from police racial profiling and police brutality. And I remember moving my lesson to the side, and I just had a classroom meeting. And I'm like, look, it seems like y'all just want to have a conversation about some of your lived experiences. And since we're in the memoir unit, we could talk about our lived experiences because this is an example of nonfiction. So tell me, what happened that Friday night? And man, Darrin, it was like a whole can of worms opened, and there were tears. And I said something to them that they mentioned to me that in their entire K through 12 education, some of them have never heard another adult say publicly. Do you know what I said to them? I said two words, and it made everyone stop in their tracks. Do you want to know what I said to them?
Yeah.
I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every adult who has ever misunderstood you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every police officer that you felt judged you without asking you where you were going. I'm sorry that you have felt misunderstood and underestimated. I am so sorry that you have been wounded and you're not even 21 years old. Man, I am so sorry. And if no one has ever told you that, I'm going to tell you that right now. And I know that that doesn't change much. I know that that doesn't erase your pain. But let me just tell you, and I get tears just thinking about it. Man, I had the most prolific gang leaders in there with tears coming down. And I'm like, this is deep. And that was healing for them. That was healing for a lot of them. And this is what I mean. It was in the confines of my classroom. It was during a normal school day. And do we have the courage? Are we able to take that risk to jump outside of our regular scheduled program and really make space for some of these kids? And those are some of the recommendations that I give for teachers that are really fearful about really taking this type of work to the next level.
Well, I mean, what you're talking about, I mean, again, it's just so powerful, but it goes at the core of what we really should be focused on. I mean, it doesn't matter what your subject your subject area happened to be English, mine happened to be science, but that's not what's relevant. I mean, we're in the people business, right? I mean, like our job is to help these little people be better little people, and maybe you do that through memoirs and poetry or through lab science or whatever, right? But it's about cutting to the core of a relationship, which is what you're talking about. And so often, I mean, I think far and away, the educators we have in the classroom right now, they care about the human being. They want to see their students. They want their students to feel seen and heard and valued and trusted. But I think sometimes they get caught up in all the other stuff, right? I mean, I love how you talked about, sometimes you just got to set the lesson aside. Sometimes you got to be even that might feel like that's a table flip right there for some classroom teachers, right? I'm supposed to
Right.
be on, such and such, right? Or my first, second, fourth, and sixth hour already got there. I can't set it aside for seventh hour.
That's right.
No, man, you got to be willing to put that time aside to focus on the human being. And man, how powerful the words "I'm sorry." A lot of educators won't say that, and maybe that's a positional thing. Maybe that's just the way it's always been. But what a and I would bet that every day going forward, more and more and more of the wall just came down a little bit
Yeah.
more every day, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And it was just so clear. And let me tell you this, and I think I've only shared this once publicly because it was a vulnerable moment for me. Um, this past Thanksgiving made a year that I lost my recent student to gun violence. She was 15 years old and she was at the wrong place at the wrong time. and she unfortunately lost her life to a drive-by shooting. It just made a year this past Thanksgiving break. I wrote an op-ed on that, and I took it to the Chicago Tribune. And I'm like, we cannot normalize this. Her name was Ruby. She had a family. She had teachers that loved her. And this will not be normalized, especially in communities of color that are oftentimes on the margins. Absolutely not. I digress. That's not even the point that I'm trying to make, Darrin. This really hit me hard because obviously I have a history of losing students violently, and I did not take it well. It goes without saying that I did not take it well when I heard the news, and it was during the school day. It was right after Thanksgiving weekend. That Monday morning, we get the email that we lost a student, and I probe deeper because if you ain't learning about me, Miss G is like, what's happening? What's the situation? And how can I help? And to realize that it was one of my former students that was part of my intervention lab, and to see how she passed, I really took it bad, and I had to leave that day. They actually had to take me out on a wheelchair because I was just beside myself. And I say this publicly because I also don't think that we talk about teacher trauma enough. And I think that that's something that we really need to lean into. And that's one of the things, and we'll talk about how I'm leaning into leadership. I know you have a question that you want to ask me about leadership. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I'm leaning into as a leader, teacher trauma, and really how to heal folks because they deserve it. But I remember coming back the next day, and I left during second period, right after second period. And so my sixth period did not see me. My sixth period junior AP language and composition. I'm going somewhere with this. I show up the next day. I'm fragile. I'm broken. I spent the evening in bed. My mother had to come over to check in on me. The texts, the emails, the phone calls, they were all flooding in. And I was very out of it. And you could tell. And I was at the front of my classroom, and I was trying to set things up. And I was just kind of like, out of sorts. And one of her best friends was in my class. And she realized that I was upset. And a lot of my students then were like, hey, Miss G, like, where were you yesterday? Like, we saw you in the morning. Like, what happened? Like, why weren't you here during sixth period? Like, why did you leave? And I had a decision to make, Darrin. I could have lied. I could have lied to my students, and I could have said, hey, listen, I had an appointment, it was for my daughter or whatever. I could have made something up. And as I stood there, I'm like, okay, do I tell them that I'm extremely heartbroken right now and that I'm not well? Or do I say, let's just move on with class and let's get to where we need to be? And just being the person that I am, I said, listen, I left yesterday because, as we all know, we lost a student, and that student was one of my students. And you all know a lot of my story because I share with my students as well throughout the school year. I didn't take it very well, and I am sorry for leaving, but it just really impacted me, and I needed some time. And would you believe that her best friend came up and she hugged me? Why am I crying on your podcast?
You're making me cry.
I know, like, it's so serious. She came up to me and she said, it's okay, Miss G. I miss her too. And she literally held me in front of the entire class for like 60 seconds. And you know what? I let her comfort me. I let her embrace me. I let her have the courage to come up and hug her teacher. Who does that? And everybody saw I was on stage. I was in front, and everybody saw the humanity that dripped from me. And I allowed my student the space and the power, talk about a role reversal, to come around and comfort me. Because guess what? Our kids teach us and they comfort us as much as we allow them to. And in that moment, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to let her hug me, because guess what? I needed it. And we had a
Yeah.
conversation after that. And it was powerful. And it was one of the, and that will go down. And listen, I've had a lot of national recognitions. I've been in a lot of places and spaces. I'm 2019 State Teacher of the Year. I can keep going. But that was one of the hallmarks of my career. That was one of the hallmarks. And I will never forget that moment. It was so special. It was so sacred. And these are the moments that I travel the country saying we need to make space for, because teaching and learning, it's a part of the human condition. And if we could let those moments in, man, it'll change our lives. That's why teaching is transformative. And that's why you and I are here in this space, right?
Yeah. 100%. Oh man. Whew. Yeah. Not a dry eye over here. Not at all. I mean, you're taking me back to a moment. One of the students that I lost, and I'm not going to get into let's take turns telling stories. I'm not going to go there, but you're taking me back to that, and one of those moments with another student in the hallway right after a similar type of situation. And those, you're right, those are the moments that you carry with you forever, that are as impactful on you as a human being as anything else that you do. I mean, the awards and the accolades, I mean, those things are wonderful. They really are. But it's those emotional connections, those moments in time that just stay frozen on your brain forever. That, man, nobody else gets to do that. Nobody else gets to do that but a teacher. I mean, that's what it's all about. Dang, man, you got me all fired up. So here's what I want to do. I mean, man, we could just keep chasing this. This is all just so good. But you kind of alluded to it. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you that question now anyway. All right. I mean, we're kind of at that point in the show anyway, where I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody. And I'm really curious to hear where you go with this, but it's the Leaning into Leadership podcast. So Sofia, how are you leaning into leadership?
Yeah, man. So as I mentioned to you off stage, I am in a really interesting school year right now. I'm on a leave of absence, and it's the first year in 15 years that I have left my post, which is serious because that whole classroom, experience for me every school year is sacred. It's holy. It has so much to do with my identity. That Miss G persona is like my alter ego, is serious. And I feel like I represent who many of our students need to see in front of them as mirrors and windows, specifically within the community that I serve, which I teach in my home community, almost 100% Latino first gen. And so it was a very serious decision that I made to leave my post and to leave the classroom. But currently, I am onboarding with the U.S. Department of Education for their School Ambassador Fellowship. I have been chasing this fellowship for 2 school years, and it's super prestigious. I believe I'm the only Latina that is Chicago-born, daughter of immigrants in that cohort. So it is very meaningful for me. And we are to develop a capstone presentation that we will, throughout the duration of the fellowship, interrogate and investigate. Mine is a working title, but what I really want to lean into in terms of being a leader in this space is the intersectionality of teacher trauma, a leaky pipeline, and the bilingual classroom. And I really want to argue through interviewing different folks in the EDU space at a national level, just the intersectionality between these 3 dynamics, that if we answer to one, we will answer to the other. For example, We cannot answer to the leaky teacher pipeline, specifically the diverse teacher pipeline, if we do not address teacher trauma. And what are we doing to retain those who are, as I have mentioned, boots on the ground, proximate to these issues that are really getting hit with vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, compassion fatigue, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which, by the way, I have all of those. And I really want to get in front of this because I know what it's like to really experience some of these intense societal issues that are infiltrating our school system, and to have little support and to have little resources to circumnavigate. In addition, we cannot answer to the huge influx of newcomers and multilingual learners that are just infiltrating our US classrooms if we do not answer to diversifying that broken teacher pipeline, because many diverse teachers enter these bilingual education classrooms to continue to amplify those cultural landscapes. And so if we continue to answer to some of these issues, I feel they're interconnected and we need to put them on a national stage. And so those are some of the things that I'm leaning into and that I'm prepping for. But as I wait, man, I can't stay silent. So, you know, I'm traveling the country, I'm keynoting, I'm giving webinars, I'm giving workshops, virtual and in person. And I'm really championing for this message of equal education opportunity for all and closing these opportunity gaps versus the achievement gaps. I feel like it's more of an opportunity issue, because if some of our nation's kids were given the same opportunities as some of their counterparts, we wouldn't be having these same conversations. It's very systemic, and I'm here to continue to speak truth to power. And I'm entering these power spaces as a Mexican in the name of urban education. And I'm not code switching. I'm coming in how I talk. I'm coming in how I roll. And I'm just really excited to bring these narratives, these lived experiences, and amplifying them. And I will give you a shout out. You have really encouraged me to pick up my manuscript and to write. And so I want to publicly thank you for that, for encouraging me to really embody this message and really get and publish and give birth, right? So that folks can walk away with all of the lived experiences, the research, the best practices, and the flows that I have acquired throughout this incredible journey. And so these are some of the things that I'm leaning into. I want to continue to be just a representation, you know, and just really represent diverse people groups and really amplify voices. And I'm just excited and honored and humbled to be part of the conversation. And sometimes I get in spaces, and when I get invited to spaces, I'm like, how in the world did I get here? I'm like, holy crap, this is serious. This just got real. Like, Miss G is out here, and I am here for it. I am passionate. I am just excited to be part of the solution. You know, the late John Lewis once said, never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get into some good trouble, necessary trouble. And this is what I'm here for. I'm here to continue this good trouble.
Man, I just love it all so much. Man, you know, I'm so glad that I reached out to you and started this connection and started this relationship. And man, just nothing but fire in this entire episode from you. And I know people are going to want to get in touch with you. They're definitely going to want that book too. You really do need to get that thing finished, right? You know, and I'm going to keep pushing on you on that, right? We're going to make sure that happens. But I know people are going to want to get in touch with you. They're going to want to check out all that you do. I mean, there are so many people that have like pulled their car over or have like, you know, they're on their run listening to this podcast and they just set like personal best because they're running so hard because you've got them so fired up. So how do they get in touch with you? How do they reach out and say, Sofia, I want to bring you into my school. I want to talk to you about this. I want to, whatever it is, right? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Darrin. Well, first of all, they can go to my website, which is sofiaspeaks.com. And my handles are all the same. So y'all can easily find me. That's @_ Sofia Speaks. And I'm online, man. Catch me online. You could get in touch with me there. You can request for me to come to your school or to your conference or whatever your needs are, I am here for it. I'm just excited to get into as many spaces and places that I can to amplify this message of transformative change and healing.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing it here to the show. And to all of our listeners, I know they're super grateful to have had an opportunity to hang out with Sofia Gonzalez today. Thank you so much for joining me here on Leaning into Leadership.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Man, how good was that? If that doesn't have you fired up, if that episode doesn't have you like ready to go run through a brick wall, more importantly, if that episode doesn't have you ready to go make a huge impact out in the space, man, I don't know, go listen to it again. Sofia is just that powerful. She's just that inspirational. And I really appreciate her coming here on the show and having that conversation with us. I think we're going to hear more from Sofia not too far down the road. So super, super appreciate her. Make sure you go check out her stuff down in the show links. And now it's time for a pep talk. So earlier this past week, I finished my first semester as an adjunct professor at Fort Hays State University. I'm teaching a classroom management course, advanced classroom management course. Essentially, all of the students that I have in class are coming into education through an alternative path. They are not your typical, I go straight into college when I'm 18 years old and I know I want to be a teacher. These are folks that all have earned undergraduate degrees in a different field prior to coming into education. And folks, we got to wrap our arms around these people. We got to embrace them. We got to be so glad that they are wanting to come and join this incredible profession. What I learned from this semester, probably more than anything, is something I already knew, but I think I needed just a little bit of a refresher. And that's the impact that a teacher has on others. But more importantly, it's the impact others have on that teacher. You know, it's been a while since I've been the classroom teacher of record. I mean, obviously, I was a school administrator for 15 years, so I did not have that in the classroom experience quite the same as I did the 11 years that I spent as a middle school and high school teacher. But what I discovered this semester with these students, and I'm excited to start my summer school course in just a few weeks, and I'm excited to see that course again coming up in the fall. But it's that impact that your students have on you just as much as the impact that you have on them. Being able to reflect on the lessons that we did, the activities that we did, the work that we did as a collective group was really interesting to hear their thoughts, the things that really stand out to them. And for those who are already working in a classroom, the changes that they've made, and those who can't wait to get started in a classroom, the things that really resonated with them. So it's that impact that then reflects back on me. So as you go through the course of your week, folks, don't forget to stop, to reflect, and to realize the impact that the people around you are having on you. You know, it's not always about our impact, but about the impact that comes back at us. Thanks for listening to the Leaning into Leadership podcast. Have a real awesome week.